Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces here today with us as we let everybody into the webinar this afternoon. We'll just pause and soon we'll get started. So it looks like we have a number of people who've joined us. And it's, as I said, so lovely to see so many familiar faces and friends here with us today to talk about this amazing transformational journey led by the Ballarat Foundation using data. My name's Kristi Mansfield. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Seer Data Analytics, and I'm going to be facilitating my conversation today with Andrew and Stacey. Firstly, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're coming to you from today. I'm coming from the Gadigal lands, people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge a continuous connection to land, sea, culture and people in place for all First Nations people around Australia. Please drop into the chat where you're coming from today. We'd love to hear that. And Andrew and Stacey, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Kristi, and great to be here on Wadawurrung land today.
Fantastic. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation today about your journeys, and I welcome and invite everybody to ask questions as we go through today. We're going to cover quite a lot of ground around Ballarat's data-driven journey and how data is informing knowledge and actions on the ground for community change. A really, really interesting project that we were able to work with you on, Andrew and Stacey. But before we get into the detail, I'd really like to understand firstly your personal journey, having worked with so many grassroots people all over Australia, community foundations, many of whom are jumping in to this session today. I know what it takes to lead transformation in the community, and it's an exceptional journey. So Andrew and Stacey, how did you come to being in the Ballarat Foundation doing this work?
Thanks, Kristi, and thanks everyone for joining us today. My background is that I spent 25 years in media, and a big part of my role, I was focused on editorial content, and at the end of my career in media as an editorial leader, it was all about gathering evidence, gathering facts to help support information flow to the people that we served, our newspaper readers and our online readers. And when I made a transition into the not-for-profit world here at the Ballarat Foundation, I guess one of the things that I identified really early on in my journey was that there was a lot of anecdotal evidence about how community foundations, how service delivery organisations responded largely to anecdotal information that was available in the community. But I identified certainly that there was a big gap in terms of being able to support that with hard evidence. And so part of my journey in relation to the Vital Signs project has very much been taking what I know from my previous history in media and utilising that to support some of the great work that I think is going to be driven through this Vital Signs project.
I love that too, because through our work working with so many people telling data stories, we understand how important it is to hold the frame and tell the story and own the narrative. And of course, being a journalist, that's core to your expertise and background. Stacey, what about yourself?
Thanks, Kristi. I've really been interested in social impact measurement for a long time and capturing, I guess, both the data but also the stories behind the data. And I found that really intriguing. So I wanted a way that we could capture that and create a local data set that I guess was a bit more current than some of the statistics that were, available. So having local data is really exciting from that point of view. And I guess a bit of an analogy that I like to use a brain surgeon wouldn't perform brain surgery without understanding the anatomy of the brain. So the anatomy is the data, and we can use that as evidence to make that positive change. So for me, it's really exciting to have the data in our hands so that we can create some of that change.
So, and it's such a great analogy, isn't it? Because being more surgical in our approach to responses has obviously been really important over the last couple of years through multiple crises that we've experienced around Australia, but also more broadly, how are we going to get better outcomes on the ground in our communities, and how can data inform that, which is really what you're describing. You had the idea to use data for this transformational journey in the community for some time. So what does it mean now for you and the foundation and your collaboration partners to have data at the desk now available to you for this work?
Yeah, I think part of what so vital signs for us has not been a new thing. We did our first vital signs report back in 2011, and it's also been a project that's happened in community foundations across Australia and indeed in Canada. So we understood the need to undertake this. But we really wanted to renew vital signs in a very different way, to create an online platform that was going to be live and would live on beyond just a simple published report. And we really wanted to use the information to drive different conversations about change in our community. And I think that's the really important leadership role that community foundations take across Australia. And to be able to have some expertise and some evidence to support that really enhances the trust, I think, that people have in our organisation to talk about these things, but then to action outcomes from it. So that's really where we saw it being playing an important role in our strategy as a business.
Trust is a very important piece to this, isn't it? There's trust in your organisation, trust in the data, and trust in the collaborations and actions that you can take as a result of having that informational asset available to the whole community. Andrew and Stacey, can you talk a little bit more about how the vital signs asset, whether it's live as a data asset on your platform, I'm going to demo that in a moment, or a report, how is that practically building trust for your partners?
So I think what it's doing for our partners in the community is enabling them to have an asset that they can use also. So the Vital Signs platform is free. It's available to anyone in our community to come onto our website and access it. And I think this is a really important part of what we want to do as an organisation. We're a tiny organisation, and so actioning, implementing our own programs and projects isn't possible. We can't meet all the needs in the community. So enabling others to get access to real data that they can use to then support grant applications that they may be making for their own projects, to support the advocacy work to government and other sources. This allows us to provide that information to community partners, and we've got literally dozens and dozens of community partners through organisations that we've funded previously through our annual grants round, or organisations that sponsor and partner our programs that we do run. So there's this great environment that we're able to create, upskilling community organisations that may not have capacity within their own four walls to go and do data analysis. And to use that information then to support furthering their own businesses. So while there's certainly outcomes that we're really keen to embed in terms of the direction of our own business, this is really about providing an opportunity for everyone in our community to get involved and improve the outcomes for the people that they're serving.
Fantastic. We're going to look at it in a moment. But before I do, what were some of the most important insights that came out of the pulse check or the vital signs data snapshot? Was there anything really surprising for you?
Yeah, thanks, Kristi. We've certainly heard a lot of anecdotal evidence around what we believed were the issues, certainly around family violence and the increase of incidents during COVID, but also the mental health. We knew, again, anecdotally, that a number of young people had taken their lives over the last 6 months or so. So it was really important for us to back that up with the real data, I guess. So we have family violence. Unfortunately, Ballarat is faring with greater disparity compared to Victoria and Australia. I guess one of the more positive things that came out of the report was the reduction in alleged youth offending for 10 to 17-year-olds, where it was a great example of where a collective of agencies came together to work towards solving one issue around youth offending. So the evidence supported that again. So we thought it was working really well, but again, to have the evidence to see that there was a significant drop was really encouraging to show that that collaborative effort can really make a difference to change.
And it must be quite mobilising, Stacey, I imagine, where you've got the informational asset available, your partners can come together, make decisions on that informational asset and then see change happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so great to have the data and have it so current that we know where we're at and where we want to get to, and then we can identify the actions to get there.
Great. Okay, let's just have a quick look at it at the demo and how that sits for your foundation and how people can access it. And a reminder to everybody who's on the webinar, please drop in any questions that you might have. We're really keen to answer them as we go through the conversation. So I've just linked through to your website, ballaratfoundation.org.au, and here you've embedded a dashboard, the Vital Signs dashboard here on your website. This is actually pulling through from the Seer platform. You can download the PDF, and oftentimes many community foundations around Australia create a PDF of their Vital Signs reports, and then key findings is all embedded here with the detail around different domains that you were looking at: health, housing and wages, family violence, mental health, unemployment, some of the key highlights. We do have videos here from different members of the community and different partners, and then linking through to how community members can access all of the insights. Now, I understand there's more than 100 indicators in this entire suite of insights for your community snapshot. So there's a lot of detailed information here for people if they'd like to look. And then more information around what to do next, how people can get involved, whether they're partners, philanthropic contributors in your community, businesses, and the theory of change that you're working towards. So quite a lot of detail to make all of this information visible for your community. If you jump into any one of these domains, and for people who are interested, you can go onto the Ballarat Foundation website, click Vital Signs and explore all of the data. I'm just going to hit through to this particular dashboard that we spoke about earlier, Stacey, on safety, that looks at family violence incidents. Would you like to comment on any of these insights?
Thanks, Kristi. I guess the incidence of family violence, again, we knew anecdotally and through networks and committees that we're involved in that there was an increase of incidents, particularly during COVID, but even prior to COVID, Ballarat wasn't faring very well. But then the evidence, I guess, brought up that the incidents, while they had dropped off a little bit, they were still quite significantly high compared to the other areas. So certainly an area that we need to do something about, so that hopefully by the time the next census comes around, some of those stats will have changed quite significantly.
here you're able to look at whether people feel safe walking after dark, breach of family violence orders. This data as well, all coming together to be able to demonstrate some interesting insights for the community to take action on. And I believe there was some really significant action taken on the back of some of the insights from the safety detail. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Just in terms of immediate responses, I guess one of the great things about a community foundation, we're not hindered by a lot of the constraints that government and other organisations have around creating responses to community need. And on International Women's Day this year, the Ballarat Foundation announced the creation of a new Women's Fund that will specifically look at responses, project-based responses in our community to some of the issues that we've identified through vital signs. And I have to say that it goes well beyond family violence. I don't think it's foreign to anyone on this call about some of the ingrained societal issues that we need to be talking about in our community. So a great way that the Ballarat Foundation can respond to the Vital Signs report, create an opportunity for the community to have some ownership over that process. So it's going to be a giving circle arrangement where members of the community will be able to join the Women's Fund by donating, and they'll have an opportunity to influence the projects that are funded from that fund. And so this is really where we've utilised a lot of the statistics that are available that we've identified through that first review of the information that we had available, and say this is how quickly we can respond and how locally we can respond.
Yeah, it's a great example of data to knowledge to action, isn't it? And how a community foundation can mobilise the resources that it has within its community to do a direct response that looks at making sustainable change. I mean, women's funds have been really central to community foundations around the world. And incidentally, for those of you who know the history of Seer Data, this idea came out of the work that I was doing for the City Women's Fund and the City Community Foundation. Our data can inform better investments or policies that would then impact some of the issues that we saw in the community there. I want to just jump back into the platform. So what we've had a look at is the website, how you can access all the dashboards, the data, all the different domains. It's quite a lot of information available for the community and partners. If you jump into Seer, then you can explore this as a dashboard in the Seer platform itself. And then I just wanted to highlight one of the other insights that, you've obviously discussed and potentially, could be of use for your action groups, which have come out of this work as well, is looking at long-term health conditions by age. And for anyone who does want to jump in and see this information, they're organised in what we call suitcases, which is where folders of insights are gathered and structured before you tell data stories in the platform itself. So Stacey and Andrew, looking at long-term health conditions by age, this is from the recent census. This blue line here is long-term mental health conditions as they compare to other health conditions in the community. So for young people, we can see the blue line is higher than any other health condition until 60s in the community. That's quite an alarming and challenging insight. What was your response to that, Stacey?
Yeah, it is alarming. And again, I guess we were hearing multiple stories from different agencies around the community that mental health, particularly in young people, was significantly poor after COVID. But I guess to see it this way, it's quite harrowing. But it's certainly, it's not a blame game. We're really just understanding where we're at and that we need to make some significant change in this particular area. So one of the action groups that we'll focus on, so we'll work with community partners to identify some key actions that can hopefully make a difference to these very difficult statistics. So we're, I guess, looking forward to working with those partners that have expertise in the area, and how can we work together as a community to support this issue and hopefully reduce some of these statistics going forward.
Thank you. So just a reminder, everyone, please do drop in any questions that you might have through the session. So we've just shown you a bit of a glimpse into the data assets that are available and that the Ballarat Foundation has created for the community. So Stacey, can you share with me, how has this work been received by community stakeholders?
People are really excited about the functionalities of the platform, Kristi. It's there's so much functionality there, and after going through some training and seeing what the capabilities of the platform are, it's quite astounding how we can bring together different forms of insights to create a full picture. Talking to a community group the other day that they were looking at early childhood data, but linking that in with employment data so that they can get an understanding of their, I guess, enrolments versus attendance data, knowing that people that are working are more likely to send their children to their early learning environment purely because, out of need, whereas potentially people that are not working may have more opportunity to keep kids home for, I guess, smaller reasons. So being able to compare different sets of data in the one spot is quite exciting for people, and the opportunity to collaborate, I think, is enticing for people. So understanding what other organisations are collecting as far as data capture, and then using that to tell their story as well. So it's been really positively received so far.
That's really good. We've talked about some of the actions that have been taken. We've talked about the action groups. Did you want to go into that a little bit more, Stacey or Andrew, how the action groups have formed and what their role will be as they look at the indicators and make decisions on, perhaps moving forward?
Sure. So the action groups will be a collective of various organisations, and it will be led by those organisations. So we will be there to facilitate, but the other organisations around the table, we will identify some key indicators or key actions that we're keen to work on, and then that group will either split off into particular areas. So, for example, there might be a mental health component, there might be a domestic violence, there might be housing, and depending how many we get, they may split off into different action groups. And then they'll identify that key action, and that'll be something that group will then work towards. And whether that's an advocacy piece, whether it's a media and education, so sharing the information further, and advocating for funding, government funding opportunities. So we don't know exactly what that looks like yet, because we really want the input of those community organisations, and they will then add data to the platform as well. So we'll capture that data and create that local suitcase. It could be a suitcase around mental health, and then we'll compile all of the data in that suitcase that's relevant to that particular indicator.
It's really exciting to see this vision come to life, because, as you know, and there's a few of the SEER team here today, and many partners that we get to work with here as well on the webinar. This vision for grassroots data collaboration, local data collaboration to inform local decision making has been one that we are so committed to and excited about. And to see that those action groups and your partners will be contributing data into that asset that the community owns and can use for decision making is really, really exciting, because we can see what the opportunities might be for the community. What are you envisaging community, what are you envisaging will come out of this work?
Change is what we're envisaging, and we're not naive enough to say that we're going to be able to move every indicator that we've identified that potentially our community is behind where we'd like it to be. So small steps, I think, but really what we want to be able to do is to take those small steps, talk to the community, show them that we've got this information, talk to them about where we think the most critical need is, respond to that need by working together, collaborating, hopefully getting governments and other philanthropic organisations to invest back into our community based upon the information that we can provide them, the great story that we're going to be able to tell about the work that we've done to make a compelling case for change in our community. And so if we can, in the first year, for instance, deliver some outcomes that influence one or two of these clearly very important issues, then I think that's a big win. In the longer term, we want to be able to measure the impact more broadly across the work that evolves from this project, and that's obviously it's a big outstanding issue that many organisations have, is that you can touch and see an impact that you're having in the community. Being able to quantify that is the next step, and something that we as an organisation certainly identified that that's the next part of the success of this. Will be able to see that and to be able to talk to those outcomes.
This lived experience, the stories, the partners, the actions, and the data together, creating that change from the ground up. I'm going to invite everybody who's online to participate in a poll. Now, I'm actually trying to activate this poll, and Kat, it's not working for me right now. If you don't mind activating it for me.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. And thank you for your questions that have come through, everybody, as well. So as we're just waiting on the poll, the question from Sue, hello Sue, is Ballarat Foundation the only organisation to have the detailed data made available via an online platform? There are many, many communities around Australia, some of whom are here on the session today, including, I think, Lorna from Gladstone, who has built their own community data insight hub and is building on that as well. The Knowledge Hub for Gladstone, which includes data that aligns to a number of indicators for what the community wants to shift in Gladstone. There are many, many, many places around Australia that are looking at data collaboration and are already doing it all across New South Wales. I think, of course, many people know about the work that's happening in Bourke, particularly the First Nations data sovereignty work and data sharing that's happening there. South Cairns in Queensland, Logan, Gladstone, of course, southwestern Sydney, Mount Druitt, the South, Bega Valley, looking to initiate their own Bega Valley data library, all across Victoria, from Mildura to East Gippsland, and of course Ballarat. Fantastic work. And then, of course, across to Kalgoorlie. So this is really a movement of community data access and data sharing and data collaboration that's driving decision making in place from the grassroots up. So the poll, I don't see it activated, Kat. Is there is that going to go ahead?
I should have just shared for everybody now on the screen. It's been working. We've had 65%
Oh,
of people. I'll just
great.
share it I'll share a screenshot in the chat.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't see that come through. That's excellent. So using data is either sometimes or frequently. And in fact, one in 5 people, 19% are saying every day. That's excellent. I wonder, that'd be really interesting to hear more about. So just getting back to the conversation, and thanks everyone for participating in that. Getting back to the conversation, Andrew and Stacey, what about this question of trust in the data? Is there trust in the data and what it shows or what it demonstrates that's happening in the community itself?
There is trust in the data, Kristi, but I guess the questions that we have received have been more around the privacy and how we can make sure that people's personal data isn't being leaked or jeopardized in any way. So I guess it's trusted data. It's coming from reliable sources, and on the platform that Kristi shared earlier, you can view the source of where it comes from and how recent that data is. So I wouldn't say there's a question around trust, but it's certainly the questions are around how is the data verified. And we certainly, working with the Seer team, triple checked and quadruple checked the data before it went to print, before it went on the live platform. So we certainly knew that the data that we had that was being represented was accurate, and that it was painting the most recent picture according to the most recent data that was available. So that was really helpful.
I think sorry, Kristi, I think just to add to that as well, we're not data experts in our business. While we have many of our team that have been involved in data reporting, all of those sort of things. We don't have that expertise. We're a tiny little 6 FTE foundation, and so our ability to be able to analyze the data in a professional way to build this sort of stuff, it was a real gap that we identified way before we even started talking about what vital signs might look like for us. So I think having that expertise, access to that expertise was just essential for us to have. And to be able to say to the community when we're getting up and we're talking to politicians at many different levels and community leaders, they know that we're small. They know that we probably don't have that capacity. So being able to say, well, actually, we had some real expertise behind this, I think really did help our messaging.
So let's just talk about some of the challenges. I've seen in the chat questions around funding, getting something like this off the ground. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you've faced, how you've overcome them, and why the Community Foundation is uniquely placed to do this work?
Well, I'll start, Andrew, and then you can follow up with some of the funding, perhaps. I think the challenges, collaboration is hard. I think people want to collaborate, and in the best interest of the community, they want to share information. Sometimes it's difficult to share information through policies and practices that don't permit that sharing. But I think if what's worked really well is that we can see that there's a common goal that we're working towards. So in the interest of improving the community, then organisations are more inclined to get on board and wanting to be part of that collaboration and wanting to make a difference in the community. So I think the will is there, and it's a matter of having that backbone support to ensure that the groups come together and that it doesn't lose momentum, I guess. So Andrew, maybe you can talk a bit more about the funding.
Yeah, certainly. So undertaking a project of this magnitude for us was, a big strategic discussion with our board. We talked to other philanthropic partners, we talked to local government, we talked to other potential partners about getting involved. And we found it was really hard initially for us to communicate our vision, because quite honestly, we didn't really know where the journey was going to take us. And so certainly we had to make a pitch within our own organisation to get that buy-in and the understanding about the possibilities and the reasons why vital signs could help us strategically determine our path as well. So we have funded stage 1 of this project internally, and through the action groups we've created a business model where there will be special behind the scenes access and training that will be delivered to our action group members in the next phase of this project, and that's going to help us fund the project for the next 12 months and hopefully beyond as well. So, and I have to say that, we got great value out of the SEER team. We've had a lot of people working on this, and we've had some community partners, the organisation which designed the printed edition and printed that for us, gave us some good deals. So it's partly about leaning on those that you can to leverage against the costs that incurs, but then it's about creating a strategy so that we can fund it in the long term and providing an incentive for those action group members who will get the opportunity to have a deeper understanding of both the platform but also the data within it if they sign up to the next stage.
Thanks, Andrew. Just wanted to raise Glenda's question here that is almost a follow-on from your comments just now. What is the commitment to ongoing collection and analysis of data? The problem continually is that these data sets, which are so helpful for informing policy and program development, are developed, these assets, and then the funding runs out and there's no ability to continue to compare over time.
Yeah, and so it's the key question for us, and we last did a vital signs in 2011, a formal printed version of 2011. So it was more than 10 years between analysis of our community needs for our organisation. So what we have determined there is that we really need to obtain more local data. So the action group members will contribute their own data to the platform, and we'll be able to match that with the nationally and statewide available data from the SEER platform itself. And so, Kristi, you're much better off to speak about the capacity of SEER to update the national and state data as it becomes available, but being able to match the local data that we'll obtain from our action group members with that state and national data sets is really how we see this maintaining its relevancy to the community, because we'll be able to update the platform as that data is available, and that's something that we're really keen to do, and to fund that. That's why we'll implement a business model. And look, we're also talking to business about this. This is not just about having service delivery organisations involved in the action group. We know that business, for instance, is having real trouble at the moment with recruitment and retention of staff. And we're saying to our community here, there's a great way for you to show your teams that you're invested in the community by doing your CSR work in response to issues in the community where your employees live and work. And so we're hoping that business will also get behind this, financially supporting it, because they'll get some information that's actually relevant to helping improve their operations.
Thanks, Andrew. And just a real quick one from me on updating publicly available data sets that are in SEER. The data team, Henry, Lavinia, and some of the folks that you know through our team, which is growing every day, we auto update those data sets when the new data becomes available. And I think at the moment, we're updating some of the latest releases from Data by Region and Census. So that's exciting to see, managing that. Great question from Rachel Drummond from Mildura. Hands up, Melanie Mildura. Thank you, Rachel, for the question. So what about the challenges in rolling this out? The data shows deficit, negative data, hard, difficult stories as well, in some cases, to share, and a small number of service providers working in the space around the sensitivities of that. How do you manage that conversation?
I think for context, there was a great conversation that happened internally in our organisation about the timing of the release of this. We released the Vital Signs report 2 weeks out from a state election. I've got to say there may well have been some nervous people in our organisation about that timing, but we stand by what we've published here, and it certainly wasn't our intention to identify the most negative indicators and put them front and centre. So we certainly did balance the focus on our indicators, ensuring that we did also communicate those that have that positively reflected on our community. And I guess we're in a fortunate position that we've got great relationships with local radio station, with the local newspaper, both of which have sub-funds with the Ballarat Foundation. And while that doesn't give us any leverage over news coverage, our relationships there were really strong. And so we're able to sit down with those organisations in advance and say, this is what we're trying to achieve with this project. Understand that from a news point of view, you may want to focus on some of these indicators, but please provide us with the opportunity to talk about what we're going to do in response. And certainly we're very careful around the communications, not to blame state government, local government, federal government. A lot of the MPs came along to the launch. We didn't get any negative feedback. They understood what we were trying to do. So there was a lot of preparation that went into that. There was some nerves, no doubt about it, but the coverage that we got and the momentum that we've had in the community since has just been incredible.
Thank you. So who are you hoping to partner with? What asks do you have of the local community, whether it's data custodians, supporters, or potential funders to drive forward the project?
Certainly, community organisations, Kristi, would be really beneficial in capturing that, grassroots local data, and that's imperative to moving forward. But we also want to partner, as Andrew said, with business. There's some great industry in Ballarat that could benefit from understanding the statistics and how it impacts their staff and the ripple effect that has on the community. And then I guess funders, we would love to see a key funder really take it on and support that, support the platform ongoing, and also to provide access to some of the smaller not-for-profits that can't afford to be part of the program that can still contribute really important data. It would be great to have someone that could, I guess, sponsor their involvement so that they can provide us with valuable data also. Andrew, did you have further partners that would like to get involved?
I think that's a great snapshot. And I think what we're trying to engender here is a conversation about we all have some responsibility here, but the Ballarat Foundation as an organisation that is community owned, that is community run, where our directors and our team are community members, that we want to take a leadership role in enabling that to occur. And so we're very much open to we were very much open to where this started, and certainly still what will evolve from here.
Stacey, just in the evolution of it, around, and we had a great comment here around, and Bernard's actually had to leave, but he was talking about too often organisations just measure outputs, not outcomes. We all have to get better at measuring the effectiveness of interventions, whatever sector we're in. How is this going to help?
Look, measuring the outcomes is so important in that social impact model, to understand what we've identified, what the actions have been, and then what the outcomes are. So for both the individual, the organisation, and the broader community. So I think having more of that long-term view and utilising the platform to capture the data over a period of time. So again, that grassroots data that we can access, say tomorrow, and then we can access again in 6 months' time to see how we're faring, and then again in 6 months beyond that. So it paints a more relevant picture of where we're sitting today, rather than, I guess, waiting for a 5-year period of census data. So that's what excites me, that we can measure those outcomes more easily by having that local data set available to us.
Thank you. Lots of questions in the chat about funding. What does it cost? Where do you get the money? How do you sustain it?
Look, and I've seen a couple of those come through. I guess broadly, just to be really upfront, it cost us about $20,000 last year. That wasn't just SEER costs. There were a number of other aspects of the project in terms of bringing community information sessions together, getting the printing and the design and all of that work happening. So it's not an insignificant cost for a small organisation. And from that point of view, it's a constant challenge. Undertaking something like this is a risk, because the outcomes that you want to drive at the end are not necessarily known. At the start, you do have to take an element of saying, do we think that strategically this is going to help us not just today and tomorrow, but next week, next month, and in 10 years' time? And I think we certainly took that approach when we were pitching this to our board, to get involved, think about how we can utilise this not only to support the community, but to forge our own path. And I really feel like we've got greater clarity as an organisation about where we should be focused. And we deliver hundreds of thousands of dollars in community grants and distributions every single year. We need an evidence base to be able to support making really good decisions in that space. And so from a community foundation perspective, data just so helps that conversation. And eventually, we've just launched our grants program for 2023 yesterday, actually. We're asking organisations whether or not they've read the Vital Signs report as part of the questions for applicants to our grants program. And eventually, I think it may even get to the point where we'll be asking grant applicants whether or not they're going to be involved in our action group, and that may be a factor in determining whether or not they also receive a grant. Because in the end, if the data is telling us these are the most important issues, then I think organisationally we want to be responding directly to those.
Thank you. So some key learnings from the experience. What are the 3 key things that you would call out and share with everybody here today around, for those that are thinking about data activating, doing data collaboration, using data for decision making, understanding context, measuring outcomes? Stacey and Andrew, what do people need to know?
So I'll kick off first. Allow time. This has been a really interesting project and this came to us through a webinar just like this in the middle of COVID lockdown, where I said, look, I think we need to have a chat to the people at SEER. It took us 12 months from deciding that we wanted to renew vital signs to getting to a point where we're ready to publish. So it was a long process, but take your time, get it right. Think about all of the things that are happening from a question point of view in the chat there. They're all really relevant items, not the least the funding element. And I think understanding the data yourself is really incredibly important. So you don't need to be an expert. And often when you start talking about data, and we had some of these conversations early on in the piece, people just glaze over and go, okay, everyone's got data. Why is yours any different? Well, when you can talk about outcomes and community and collaboration, it suddenly becomes more powerful. So I think taking time to understand that aspect of the project, I think took us a while to get our heads around it, but that really helped. Stace?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I certainly agree with what you've said there. I would suggest to and encourage people to consult early and widely with a broad range of stakeholders to really help identify both anecdotally the key issues, so hear that from the people on the ground, and then use the data to test those assumptions. So I think, get as many people involved early on as possible to help really get a good understanding of what the community believe the issues are before you present the data or analyse the data.
Really good point. And I think that's happening in many, many places all over, that impression of what the issues are, what the data is saying, does this make sense, does it align, etc. So where to from here, Stacey and Andrew? What are the best next phases? What are you focused on in the next short while as you scale this out?
We're really keen to get more community organisations involved. So we want those community partners that can contribute to the local data set. Really happy to talk to any organisation that is keen to share any data that they already capture. So we don't want to make it onerous for anyone, that data that you're already capturing for reports, for funding submissions, any of those that could create that local data set, particularly in the key indicators, but more broadly than that also. So I guess, reach out, and Andrew and I are happy to have a conversation with you to talk about how your organisation could contribute to the data and create that really robust data set that we're hoping to achieve. So call to action, that's it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Stacey. So just a couple more questions that are coming through, and I want to give my own reflection on the costs issue. I mean, one of the reasons why Adam and I started SEER was because we could see that technology would be able to give greater access to people such as yourselves in communities to informational assets that were publicly available, but also do the ingestion of data to build that community data asset at a fraction of the cost that it would otherwise be if you were engaging a consultant to do that work. And so through our analysis, we can see that systems change effort through technology, by making data accessible and shareable and usable, has driven down the costs of this kind of work by 6 times. So where it would be over $100,000, $200,000 to do that, even more if you were outsourcing to large consulting houses or even data analysts and specialists. All of this work we're trying to really make accessible from a cost perspective as well, notwithstanding the fact that is a large amount for a small organisations such as yourselves. Just a question or a reflection, Andrew and Stacey, on this from your perspective. I think we're hearing the benefits and the value proposition of community data and being able to understand and be more surgical in your grants making approaches through the evidence-based partnerships, aligning to outcomes. Who should be funding this?
That's a really good question, Kristi. I think there's a role for government in this, and I really, if you look at the many different levels of government that we have, there's definitely ambiguity that exists about the role in supporting community. I mean, as an organisation, as an example, we have Volunteering Ballarat, a program that in essence is triple funded across different levels of government, with there being not a lot of clarity about where the responsibility lies. I think community collaborations at a low end, local government's got a massive role. I think though, if we want to spread the knowledge and the information and empower communities, that this is more likely to be a federal government responsibility. And I truly think that there's a role there. I think it's great that this is largely being led by community organisations and philanthropics that are involved, and there's some great partnerships that happen across the philanthropic sector. So there are opportunities, but you know, I would love to see a broader commitment from the federal government, because our experience here in Ballarat shouldn't be any different to the experience that our friends in Bendigo or Geelong or Newcastle or Cairns, because the needs of the community are the same. If you've got evidence and you can support making a case that's built on facts, you're likely to be able to drive better outcomes for the community.
Yeah, I agree. And watch this space. Local decision making is part of the next federal budget, and what data can empower is an active conversation we're having with Treasury right now. And the other part of that is that community wants to own its data assets. That whilst governments can facilitate and support place-based work, whether it's community-led decision-making, place-based work, local decision-making, making sure that informational assets are available and accessible to communities is really key to making that successful. But our argument, of course, is government should not be building data platforms. They should be facilitating access to communities to fund their own assets and their own platforms.
Yeah, we don't need any more red tape.
I had one more question in the last couple of minutes, and thanks, Peter, for highlighting, you know, your journey as well. It's been fantastic to similarly work with your organisation at Southern Highlands. So he's dropped in his contact details to talk about their journey. Just a really great question about behaviour change as we wrap up. How do you think behaviour change in the community can happen to address these key issues?
I think the attitude around change, there's an appetite for it. I think we as a community, we can see that there's a need for change. The systems aren't necessarily working the way that they could be. So systems change could be really important in addressing some of these indicators that we're seeing are so prevalent. So I think there's appetite, but it takes someone to lead that and to continue the conversation and build the momentum and carry through with the actions that are identified. So for me, there is an appetite. I would like to see some systems change to address some of these things. So hopefully this is a good way to provide the evidence that the systems do need to change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Congratulations. It's been wonderful to hear your story. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We appreciate your time very much. Looking forward to being in touch with you afterwards and learning more together as we grow the community data sovereignty movement together with you all. And once again, looking forward to, we will send out some follow-up materials to everybody. The recording will be available, as well as some resources. Congratulations, Andrew and Stacey, and good luck in the next phase.
Thank you, Kristi, and thanks so much for hosting today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks so much for your support to the SEER team. It's been fantastic to work with you all, so we're excited for the next phase of the journey.
Thank you. Enjoy your afternoon, everyone.